Last time we were looking at this image here, which is a glimpse inside the Empress's grand apartments in the palace, and it really shows you the scale of the rooms itself, because there's a small set of furniture here, and then you've got this great big painted drawing room, which is the Empress's state drawing room in the palace itself. I've drawn a little image of a woman there to sort of show the scale of the room itself. The doors are enormous. Each room is huge. And so Strarsbourg is comprised of a series of small residences because each member of the Imperial family live in their own separate residence. So Strarsbourg is a combination of small residences where each member sort of lives in their own kind of residence, if you like, but it's all connected together. From the outside, facing from the garden, Strarsbourg looks like a very symmetrical layout, but then behind the grand facade is a rambling complex of different buildings, different palaces all connected together, different buildings added over time, so some in the old style and some in the new style. Because of the family's wealth, each member of the Imperial family has their own household. So it means they have their own servants, they have their own footmen, maids, everyone who looks after them is their own householders. And they live in their own separate residences, like I say. And each palace is treated as a separate residence. So, but they are all connected. So when visitors, because Strasbourg is open to the public, you see. So when visitors come to Strasbourg, they can walk through each of the different palaces via a series of grand apartments. Because each different person in the different palaces, they have a set of grand apartments which they sort of leave open to the public so that people can come and view the art collections and so on. And it's also a chance for the public to witness the public ceremonies of the court, which we're going to talk about now. So this here is a scene inside of the court. The picture isn't completely finished, but it gives you an idea of how the court really worked. So this is a scene of the Grand Corver, which means it's like a dining ceremony, because each member of the Imperial family do this sort of daily ceremonial routines called sort of a ceremonial court occasions. So they make their most private things into a domestic display of the court. So whoever comes in, so for instance, eating their meals is a public occasion. Dressing up and dressing down each day is a public occasion called the levee and the coucher. So here, this is an image of the Empress, is the Grand Corver. So the ceremony is just starting. So you can see here the doors are open, they're flung open, and members of the court are starting to enter the room to witness the Imperial family eating their dinner in public. It's also an occasion for the Empress to address the court and talk about various comings and doings of the daily life. And you can see the grandeur of the room itself. It's not completely finished, the ceiling isn't painted yet, but you can see the architecture and just the overall grandeur of the space. Because the thing about Strasbourg, especially the rooms of the Empress, every single corner of the palace is just completely overly grandeur, if that makes any sense. Every space of it is just completely decked out in the most luxurious everything possible. Everything is covered in gold. Everything is all bronze gilt everywhere, and it's a sign of that they're really trying to express the wealth of the Empress herself. And here, this is just one of the many grand rooms in the Empress's grand apartments. We've seen the drawing room, the great drawing room, and now we're seeing the sort of dining chamber in the Empress's grand apartments. So nobody can see there, but this is the Empress with her family sitting at the table, and what's happening is all the footmen are walking out, carrying various food trays to the table, placing them, which would have been on silver plates with tops on them, in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, all the most luxurious foods. And here we can see this candelabra on the table, and in the centre here is the Empress, and then to the left here is Madame la Dauphine, who is the Dauphin's wife, who's just sitting there, the Crown Prince. And they're sitting under this beautiful, massive canopy, because it's supposed to be like a theatre display. So they've set up this great big canopy. And you can see behind there's a little doorway. So the court would enter the room via the door here, but then the Imperial family would come in through this small alcove and sit at the table. And you may notice, you may be thinking, where is the Emperor? Because you think if the whole family was sitting down together, the Emperor might be present as well, but he isn't. Because at this time, this picture was supposed to be done sort of midway through the Empress's reign. And by this time, the Emperor much prefers to spend time with his mistress, Madame de Monti, in private. So the Empress dines with her daughter-in-law and her son just there. So that's how it becomes at court. And really the court starts to focus more on the Empress because she's seen, and she because the Emperor is less present at these occasions, the Empress kind of takes control, and everyone starts favouring her more than the Emperor himself. And you can see there's all these ladies and gentlemen standing everywhere. And you can tell they're aristocracy because they're wearing these sort of strange feathers on their big wigs. Because the white feather was a symbol of power, like I say. So the aristocracy would wear big feathers in their hair. And the Imperial family themselves, like I was saying before, they wear these big feathers on their crowns as well, because it's a sign of imperial power. And we can see there's lots of aristocracy coming in here. There's dogs running around, etc. And you can tell who's the highest member of aristocracy because these ladies here, the Duchesses, they have these little footmen here holding their big drapes up, their big, not drapes, like their robes that they wear around the court. And you can see here there's another boy there holding up her big massive robes there. So you can tell they're of very high wealth. And over here there's a door which is it blends into the wall when it's closed. And you can see there's another footman there just poking out, bringing out another tray of food. And when the door's closed, it sort of blends in with the wall. So it gives the servants a sort of an inconspicuous entrance into the chamber itself to prove, that because they're not really supposed to be seen. And the Empress would perform this ceremony every day with her family. Usually there'll be lots more present, so there'll be all the Grand Duchesses, which would be her daughters, who might sometimes join them, or they might hold their own Grand Corver in their own residence. This one is a scene supposed to be depicting the Empress's state bedchamber. And this is just a small glimpse of the room, because the room is enormous itself. Because of the amount of people who come to court every day, because there's already lots of people living there, such as the aristocracy and all the sort of different households. But the public come in every day. So the Empress has built these rooms on a massive scale. Each one of them is like the size of a concert hall. It's a huge space. And the reason it's so big is it allows lots of members of the public to walk in, aristocracy, just to witness the Empress's bedchamber, because and also the grand levee ceremony. Because the Empress rules such a vast area of the world, there's tons of people who come to court every day to witness and see this very sort of grand woman living her daily life at court and how she rules and everything. And what she does every day, basically, because they're curious, So this chamber is really, really over the top. And every room in the state apartments in the Empress's palace, she builds on an enormous scale. And each one of them is decked out just with loads and loads of gold. Each room has marble floors. And it's just designed to represent the power and wealth of the Empress. And there's lots of symbolic symbols everywhere, all over in the architecture. So here we can see her bed. Now, she wouldn't sleep here in this bed, but she would turn up here every morning to attend the grand levee. And there's also a balustrade here. It takes French influence from Versailles, because the Empress likes to keep the people back from her bed. Because there's so many people in there, she needs a kind of barrier to keep them back from the bed. Because occasions like births, or like I say, the levee or the coucher, are very public events, and it's the aristocracy's right, and also the people's, to see their monarch every day performing these duties, because she has a public duty to the court and to the people. So she performs these daily ceremonies to kind of keep them in check, keep them happy. But she also gives the aristocracy these silly titles like the Groom of the Stool or things like that, which don't mean anything really, but they sound like very grand titles to kind of make them think that they are, have all this high authority at court. But actually, really, it's just the Empress that has most of the power. Now, behind this bedchamber, sort of facing the inner courtyard, are the Empress's private apartments. They're slightly smaller rooms, and they are designed for the Empress's personal life, so she can live out her personal day-to-day life in these rooms. And then when she wants to make public appearances, she goes into the state apartments through the door there. But she lives out her personal life, her actual life, in her private apartments. So the Empress has her state apartments, and then she has her private apartments. But then also, she has another series of rooms on the ground floor, which is called her day apartment. And what it is, it's a place where the Empress can go during the daytime. So during the runnings and goings of the day, the Empress can retire to her day apartment, which is slightly less formal than the grand apartments upstairs, where she can retire and sit with her friends, etc. So it's a very organised sequence, really. And the Emperor has the same thing, but you don't really see him much at court, because he's always with his mistress, Madame de Monti, in his private chateau in the grounds of Strarsbourg. This is a drawing of Madame Maria Sophie, or Archduchess Maria Sophie, who is one of the daughters of the Empress. And you can see the kind of lavish style in which the females dress at the court. And members of the female aristocracy would take influence off of the female members of the imperial family in terms of fashion. So whatever they were wearing, the female members at court, the duchesses, etc., would try and copy them in what they're wearing, because that they believe themselves to be on the same level as the imperial family. But it wasn't the case. But you can see here they have these huge wigs, which will be stuffed with horsehair, or something fluffy to kind of hold it all up in shape. In the centre would be a more hard bit of the hair, which supports the whole thing. They wear these collar pieces, sort of like similar to an Elizabethan ruff, which they'd wear around the back of their dresses there. And she has these beautiful lace collars with these oversized end pieces there, and a beautiful bodice, and then this massive wide panniered skirt, and also the lace on the back of the hair there, all this lace, because for some reason at court it was a thing for the ladies to cover up the back of their hair, some kind of religious thing, so they wouldn't show the back of their hair. If you did, it was a sign that you were very easy, if you know what I mean. This picture here is a coloured image of one of the doorways in the grand apartment of the Empress, and it really gives us a glimpse of the grandeur of the palace, because this is just a doorway. So you can imagine how over the top and splendid the space would be altogether. You can see we have the marble floor, like I was saying, and the doorways are huge. Some of normal size would be that sort of size compared to the door itself. So it is massive. And everything was, display and wealth at Strasbourg. And it also takes influence off of the Louis XV style, Versailles, and also sort of Asian influences with the shells and things like that. So it's a blend of styles, but it is very grand and unique, and it just gives you a glimpse of the grandeur of Strasbourg. Here we have a glimpse of another doorway, and the door is open this time, and it shows you it leads into a small room behind there, because it's a doorway leading into the private apartments in the palace. Even though it's a doorway that's leading into private rooms, it's still on a magnificent, very grand scale, so detailed. And like I say, every space in the palace in the Empress's rooms would be like this, heavily decked out in gilt bronze everywhere, scattered all over the walls in patterns and everything, columns and painted ceilings. It would be like a theatre set. Versailles on steroids, if you'd like to use that as a sort of little thing there. But you can see there's a table here, solid gold table with a clock on the top, mirror behind, and lots of swags and medallions and beautiful architectural styles. And again with the feathers on the top there, the Imperial symbol for power and such and such. This room is in the apartments of Madame Marie-Louise. So she is one of the Empress's daughters. And you can see this takes Russian influence with the barrelled ceiling there. Again, it's very grand and over the top. This is just like a small antechamber, sort of a room off of the bigger chamber. So most big chambers in the grand apartments, so the sort of large rooms where the court would gather, would often have small antechambers leading off to the side there, often drawing rooms or waiting rooms, etc. But you can see it's on a beautiful scale and very grand all the same. This doorway actually leans into the apartments of Madame de Monte, like I was saying, the Emperor's mistress. And again, it's enormously over the top, kind of almost too much really. But that was what Strarsbourg was all about, was the over-the-top grandeur really. And for a doorway leading into the mistress's apartments, really just goes to show the kind of wealth and lavishness that Madame de Monte would have lived in. There's a small sort of pendant of her face there above the door, and you can just see it's just decked out in all this gold, and it's just incredibly beautiful. Here is another doorway in the Emperor's grand apartments, and you can see it's on a slightly different style, more Asian themed I think, but with a sort of slight French influence with the panelling on the doors. Very beautiful indeed. And each of the different styles in the different grand apartments, in the different residences at court, would all have to sort of be slightly different, their own style sort of thing. And we'll see about that later on anyway. So this image here you may mistake for being like a plan for a country house, but in actual fact it's the central courtyard of Strarsbourg, the Palace Imperial. And you imagine the wings coming down either side here of the courtyard, and this is called sort of like the central block. Strarsbourg used to be a very small chateau, which belonged to the Imperial family for a while. And it was a sort of a country retreat, a country residence where they would go to escape the capital city, which was full of smog and pollution, which they weren't very fond of. So they're sort of coming to this chateau for weekends and things with, a few members of their party. And this sort of chateau would have been home to them. So this was very much embellished by the Empress. She added these domes on the top there with the sort of central pavilions on the top. But you can see this would have been the original facade. And this eventually was very much expanded outwards. So you imagine all the different palaces would have been expanded around it. Round the back of this chateau is a part of it which is enveloped around the small chateau itself, like Versailles. So a big building would have been wrapped around the central small block, creating a sort of a mix of the old and new. The new style was very much the Italian Baroque, mixed with a bit of Rococo, so a very playful style. We can talk about that a bit later. If I do a quick demonstration here, so we see this little sort of rectangle would have been the original chateau, very small, and then there would have been a building wrapped around the small chateau, you see, creating a sort of a new facade for the gardens, which expand that way. And then the Empress would have built her palace over here, and then the Empress palace over there, and then there would have been a long central courtyard here, where the sort of important people would have come. Only people of very high position would have been allowed into the central courtyard here. So there'd be wings here as well, and then stretching off either side, there'll be another courtyard here and a courtyard here. So stretching off either side would have been the residences of the Imperial family, and the courtyard here would have slowly gotten wider, so you see. And then there would have been palaces, over here and over here, and so on and so forth. So all these small palaces connected to the central block, essentially, if you know what I mean. This is an idea of the Empress's crown jewels. And you may be wondering, why does she have all these different crowns just for one person? Well, this one here is the Crown of Empire. So this is the most richly decorated crown of the collection, which represents the empire itself. With the, you notice all the crowns have these feathers on the top because that's the imperial symbol, like I say. She has these two massive scepters here, one representing power and religion, and one representing the royal family, the monarchy, etc. So that's how it kind of works there. All these crowns, are sat on pillows, and then down here we have beautiful ermine robes, and then sitting on top of that robes are necklaces, which the Empress would wear in grand ceremonies, and even in her coronation. She has two orbs, and then there's a beautiful painted mirror on the back there, like a heavenly scene. All these different crowns and diadems represent different areas of the empire, all the different districts. So we have the central powerful crown, which is the crown of empire. Then we have these two smaller crowns here, and they represent different kingdoms of the empire, different districts. It's all under the same rule, but it represents different parts of the empire. So for the smaller principalities in the kingdom, under the rule of vice, so they would have been like a prince and a princess ruling the different districts, but they would have, I call it vice because they wouldn't have had any official royal powers. They would have just ruled in the name of the Empress in these different areas. And these people, like I said in the last video, would have been the Empress's children who would have went out into the empire and ruled different districts in the name of the Empress. So some of them would have been princes of lower position, and some of them would have been kings and queens, or viceroy and viceroy, essentially. And these crowns kind of represent the higher and lower statuses of the different monarchs in the empire, ruling in the name of the Empress. I hope you guys found that video very interesting. I love talking about Strasbourg and all the different components of it, and the gardens, etc. And I love talking about how the palace works and everything. It's just really fascinating to me. I may have went on a bit there, but I love talking about my little story here. It's just a fascination of mine. So thank you guys for watching. And next time I'll be talking about the species, the Homo Venetians who ruled the planet of Nebular-Putar. So I'll go on about that a bit later on, but that'll be my next episode. So thank you for watching, guys. I very much appreciate it, and stay tuned for the next episode of Emperia. Thank you.